Did you know that one mistake could cost millions of lives? In this story, the USA decided the fate of the war in just a few days. If you're interested in the truth about World War II, subscribe and hit the like button. There are many shocking facts ahead. June 19, 1944, Chidori Airfield, Iwo Jima. Imagine the sharp hiss of hot wind against your face as you step from a military transport onto a desolate runway of volcanic ash. The air feels like a furnace, thick, stifling, clinging to your skin. Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, a man of 52, seasoned by decades in the Imperial Army, takes his first steps on the blackened soil of Iwo Jima, a forbidding 8-square-mile fortress of lava and sand. In his hands, he carries a command etched with finality, orders bearing the personal seal of Prime Minister Hideki Tojo himself. Hold Iwo Jima at all costs. Not just a mission, a sentence. To the south, the unmistakable silhouette of Mount Suribachi cuts against the sky like a silent sentinel. Beneath his boots, the earth is scorched and barren. No trees, no refuge, just soot-colored sand stretching to the sea. Kuribayashi scans the desolation and instantly grasps the brutal clarity of his fate. Later, his wife Yoshi would recall his words upon receiving this assignment: "Even my ashes may never return." Now picture this. Iwo Jima lies some 750 miles south of Tokyo, a jagged tooth in the Pacific, jutting between the American-held Marianas and the Japanese homeland. Its trio of airfields serves as a critical launch point for interceptors, the only chance to disrupt the streams of American B-29 superfortresses soaring northward to lay waste to Japan's cities. But when the Americans seize this island, the consequences are catastrophic. Japan loses its early warning eyes. Damaged bombers will find haven here, not death. And most importantly, the skies over Tokyo will soon be darkened by waves of P-51 Mustangs escorting destruction to the Emperor's doorstep. Neither Kuribayashi nor the 21,000 soldiers destined to follow him to this volcanic graveyard knew the scale of what was coming. But history would soon brand it with fire, the bloodiest battle ever fought by the United States Marine Corps. 36 days of relentless carnage, a campaign soaked in courage and futility, a doomed stand in defense of a fading empire. Yet this assignment was not merely a matter of military duty. It was a theater of political exile. Just days before his deployment on June 8, 1944, Kuribayashi was granted a rare imperial audience. Emperor Hirohito himself spoke to him. On the surface, an honor. But dig deeper, and the shadows of intention grow darker. Historians like Kumiko Kakehashi suggest that this wasn't recognition. It was elimination, a quiet purge masked in medals. Kuribayashi, you see, had never truly belonged to the militarist elite now steering Japan into the abyss. His crime? Clarity. From 1928 to 1930, he had walked the streets of Chicago, the halls of Harvard, the roaring factories of Detroit, serving as Japan's deputy military attaché in the United States. He had seen, with his own eyes, the boundless energy of American industry, the adaptability of its people. He wrote to Yoshi with startling honesty. "The United States is the last country in the world Japan should fight. Its industrial potential is huge and fabulous, and the people are energetic and versatile. But in an era when the Japanese high command worshipped spiritual resolve over steel and oil, such words sounded like heresy. Among the nationalist hardliners, Kuribayashi had become a marked man, a pragmatist among zealots. And yet none of this dulled his commitment. Once on Iwo Jima, he set to work with a laser focus. Touring the island's defenses, he quickly saw the fatal flaw. As always, Japanese troops had been preparing to meet the invaders at the beaches, digging shallow trenches along the shoreline, the same doomed tactic used at Tarawa. Kuribayashi's response was immediate and absolute. Cease the beach defenses. He had studied what had happened there. At Tarawa, American naval guns had turned the beaches into charnel houses before the first Marine even stepped ashore. To repeat that mistake would be to waste lives in a blaze of meaningless glory, and Kuribayashi would not permit it. He had studied the slaughter at Saipan. He had learned its brutal lesson. Thousands of Japanese soldiers screaming "Banzai" had hurled themselves at American lines in a final, desperate rush, a storm of courage that ended in nothing but silence. Those charges, noble as they were, had bought no time, changed no outcomes, and drained the empire of yet more irreplaceable lives. Kuribayashi saw the truth. Honor alone could not win this war. Iwo Jima, under his command, would not follow that path. What he envisioned was nothing short of revolutionary, a complete reversal of doctrine, a defiant break from the traditional Japanese mindset of meeting the enemy head-on in one glorious doomed stand. No, Kuribayashi would build a fortress beneath the earth. Rather than man the beaches and be slaughtered by naval guns before the enemy even landed, he would let the Americans come ashore, invite them in, draw them into the killing fields of the island's interior, and then annihilate them from concealed strongholds carved deep into volcanic rock, places no battleship's guns or bombers' payload could touch. He ordered a radical shift. The engineers, not the riflemen, would now lead the defense. Using Iwo Jima's natural caves and unforgiving geology, they would fashion a labyrinth of tunnels, bunkers, and artillery nests invisible from the air, yet lethal in their silence. A quarter of the entire garrison, thousands of men, were reassigned to excavation duty. Picks replaced rifles. Shovels, not bayonets, became their tools of war. The decision was immediate and controversial. Some of Kuribayashi's officers bristled at what they saw as wasted potential. "We should be drilling soldiers," they argued, "not turning them into miners." But Kuribayashi stood firm. Again and again he reminded them, "America's productive power is beyond our imagination. We've picked a fight with a giant. We must prepare accordingly." And so, deep beneath the baking surface of Iwo Jima, one of the most sophisticated defensive construction projects of the entire Pacific War began to take shape. Mining engineers were summoned from the home islands. They drafted meticulous blueprints, tunnel systems built at staggered depths, allowing for airflow and reducing the catastrophic impact of nearby explosions. Ventilation was a science, camouflage, an art. Every meter of earth moved was another second of survival. By February 1945, just weeks before the American assault, Kuribayashi's vision had become reality. More than 18 kilometers of tunnels honeycombed the island, linking machine gun nests, mortar pits, artillery positions, and command centers into a single, interwoven web of resistance. The work was hellish. Picture it. Soldiers, pickaxes in hand, hacking through volcanic rock in stifling darkness, the air thick with dust and heat. Temperatures underground ranged from 30 to 50 degrees Celsius. It was like digging inside a furnace. Men collapsed constantly. Heat stroke was rampant. Fresh water was a luxury. ferried in perilously by submarines or smuggled through waters teeming with American hunter-killer patrols. And still, they dug. The northern slope of Mount Suribachi alone concealed several thousand yards of tunnels, transforming the iconic peak into a buried serpent of steel and stone. The nerve center of the entire operation lay in the island's northern highlands, near the village of Kita. There, 20 meters beneath the surface, Kuribayashi established his war room, a bunker complex with multiple chambers linked by 150 meters of passageway, shielded from bombs and bullets alike. But who were the men entrusted to defend this underground citadel? By the final days of preparation, Iwo Jima had become a microcosm of Japan's strained military. At its core stood the 109th Division, roughly 13,000 Army troops split between two independent mixed brigades. The 2nd Independent Mixed Brigade, under Major General Kotao Osuga, numbered about 5,000 men. Another 2,700 belonged to the 145th Infantry Regiment, led by Colonel Masuo Ikeda. Alongside them stood the Navy's contingent, approximately 7,500 sailors and airmen of the 27th Air Flotilla, commanded by Rear Admiral Toshinosuke Ichimaru. But make no mistake, this was not a force of hardened veterans. Many of these men had never seen combat. Some were green conscripts, barely trained before being thrown into the island's crucible. Others were middle-aged reservists, pulled from homes and offices as Japan scraped the bottom of its manpower barrel. Support staff, clerks, mechanics, now given rifles and told they would fight to the death. The empire was bleeding, and this was its last stand. And yet, under Kuribayashi's command, they would hold Iwo Jima like no garrison had ever held ground before. Among the defenders of Iwo Jima, one figure stood out like a character from an epic tragedy: Colonel Baron Takeichi Nishi, commander of the 26th Tank Regiment. Can you picture him? A nobleman by birth, an Olympic champion by triumph, and now a soldier facing near certain death on a volcanic island far from the glamour of his past. Born on July 12, 1902, Nishi was no ordinary officer. In 1932, under the California sun, he soared to international fame by winning Olympic gold in show jumping at the Los Angeles Games. He became a sensation, charming Hollywood elites, forging friendships with stars like Charlie Chaplin, Douglas Fairbanks, and Mary Pickford. But the brightness of that golden era faded swiftly as war engulfed his nation. After Pearl Harbor, his widow would later recall, Nishi fell into despondence. He knew, with the clarity of a man who had once walked the boulevards of America, that war against such an adversary was sheer madness, and yet duty pulled him back. Then came disaster. On July 18, 1944, as Nishi's regiment sailed from Busan, Korea to Iwo Jima, fate struck from beneath the waves. The USS Kobuya, an American submarine, torpedoed the transport ship. In moments, all 28 of Nishi's tanks were swallowed by the Pacific, but the Baron did not falter. He returned to Tokyo and fought bureaucratic battles instead of battlefield ones, managing to secure 22 replacement tanks. During this fleeting visit home, he made a final pilgrimage, not to a shrine, but to his beloved horse, Uranus, the noble steed who had carried him to Olympic victory. Back on Iwo Jima, the pace of preparation quickened. American submarines prowled the waters, aircraft bombed relentlessly, but the defenders worked ceaselessly. Then came an unexpected discovery. The island's black volcanic ash mixed with cement yielded an unusually strong form of concrete, and with that, the island began its transformation. Reinforced pillboxes with 4-foot-thick concrete walls rose from the ash, capable of enduring direct hits from naval shells. Anti-aircraft emplacements mushroomed across the island, roughly 300 in total. The Japanese installed 33 naval guns ranging from 7 to 6 inches, 438 artillery pieces, 69 anti-tank guns, and those 22 salvage tanks, now buried up to their turrets, forming immovable gun platforms disguised as terrain. The island became a machine for killing. Underground, gasoline-powered generators hummed to life, powering radios, lights, and ventilation systems. Hundreds of artillery and mortar positions were camouflaged in silence, hidden in hills, valleys, and bunkers. Every ridge, every slope, every inch of Iwo Jima could unleash death from a concealed position. Kuribayashi's defensive philosophy was more than unorthodox. It was heretical by the standards of Japanese military tradition. He forbade banzai charges, no screaming, suicidal rushes into enemy fire, no symbolic gestures of honor that cost thousands of lives for nothing. Those were the ghosts of Saipan and Tarawa, and Kuribayashi wanted no part of them. Instead, he issued a stark, chilling order. Each man must kill at least 10 Americans before dying. The goal wasn't to win. That was impossible. The goal was to make the cost of victory unbearable. This radical thinking split the officer corps. One key figure, Vice Admiral Sadaichi Matsunaga, resisted bitterly. He wanted traditional beach defenses, a direct confrontation at the shoreline. But Kuribayashi wouldn't bend. In a dramatic move, he relieved Matsunaga of command, replacing him with Rear Admiral Toshinosuke Ichimaru, a more cooperative partner who aligned with the Army's deeper defensive strategy. By December 1944, Kuribayashi circled a date on the calendar, February 11, 1945, the target for completion of the island's defenses. Despite American submarines haunting every supply route and bombers harassing day and night, reinforcements continued arriving through January. By the eve of battle, between 21,000 and 23,000 men stood ready, or as ready as one could be in such a place. But readiness is not the same as abundance. The defenders had only 60% of the ammunition required for a single division-level engagement. Food was calculated to last no more than 4 months. Water, the most basic necessity, remained desperately scarce. Already, the cost had been brutal. Roughly 1,500 Japanese troops had died at sea, their ships sunk by American submarines before they ever set foot on the island. And those who did arrive faced a slow agony. Life on Iwo Jima, in those final weeks before the storm, was a descent into purgatory. Soldiers slept in caves and tunnels pressed against searing volcanic rock. The air reeked of sulfur, thick and foul. There were no trees, no shade, only scrub grass and blistering heat. Disease ran rampant: dysentery, heat rash, tropical infections. Medical supplies were pitiful. Nutrition was poor. Sanitation was non-existent. Men died before a single shot had been fired. And yet, in this hell, General Kuribayashi remained one of them. He took no special privileges. His subordinates recalled with awe how he would visit wounded enlisted men in the field hospital, an unthinkable act for a general staff officer. When water rations were cut, he drank no more than the lowest private. And in letters home, a different Kuribayashi emerged. Not the commander, but the father, the husband, the man. A soul carrying the burden of inevitable death. To his wife Yoshi, he wrote in November 1944, You must not expect my survival. The enemy may land on this island soon. Once they do, we must follow the fate of those on Attu and Saipan. Our officers and men know about death very well. These were not the words of a man hoping for victory. They were the farewell of Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, written with unwavering clarity. I am sorry to end my life here fighting the United States of America, but I want to defend this island as long as possible and delay the enemy air raids on Tokyo. His message to his wife Yoshi was both personal and prophetic. Watch out for your health and live long. The future of our children will not be easy either. Please take care of them after my death. No illusions, no false bravado. Kuribayashi understood exactly what was coming, the longest bombardment. Starting June 15, 1944, American bombers, B-24s and B-25s, began pounding Iwo Jima with fire and thunder. The skies darkened with waves of steel for 74 consecutive days, marking the longest pre-invasion bombardment of the Pacific War. Bomb craters pocked the runways. Surface structures vanished in clouds of ash and smoke. But beneath it all, the defenders waited. Kuribayashi's tunnel network, buried in volcanic stone, remained eerily intact. From above, American reconnaissance told a deceptive story. Intelligence officers pored over aerial photographs showing shattered airfields and smoldering ruins. To them, it looked like victory had already been half won. They estimated the island housed 13,000 to 15,000 Japanese troops, thousands fewer than the actual strength. Most dangerously, they could not see underground. The massive tunnel complexes, machine gun nests, and buried artillery emplacements remained invisible to American eyes. Final phase begins February 16, 1945. The final prelude to invasion came with a roar. On February 16th, American battleships, cruisers, and destroyers unleashed a cataclysmic naval bombardment. Major General Harry Schmidt, commanding the Marine Forces, had requested 10 days of heavy shelling. He got 3, cut short by worsening weather. Still, the guns spoke. The island trembled. Kuribayashi's men huddled in the tunnels while the mountain itself shook above them. Debris fell like rain. The air was thick with dust. Some men prayed. Others sat in silence. Many wrote final letters they knew would never be sent. On February 17th, 12 LCI gunboats advanced to support underwater demolition teams. That's when the Japanese struck. Emerging suddenly, they opened fire with everything: artillery, mortars, machine guns. LCI 449 was sunk. Several others were torn apart. 170 American casualties. But the sacrifice wasn't in vain. The response revealed hidden Japanese firing positions, giving the USS Tennessee and USS Idaho targets to annihilate the following day, just 2,500 yards from shore. By invasion day, American forces had already fired an astounding 22,000 shells at Iwo Jima. Yet, Kuribayashi's defenses had survived, untouched, where it mattered most. D-Day, February 19, 1945. At exactly 08:59, the silence shattered. The first waves of Marines from the 4th and 5th Divisions surged toward the island aboard amphibious tractors. From the shore, it looked endless. An armada of steel. Behind them, the support fleet stretched to the horizon. Battleships, carriers, destroyers, a testament to American naval might unlike anything the Japanese defenders had ever seen. As the landing craft neared shore, Marines leapt out, only to sink ankle-deep into volcanic ash. The black sand was soft, loose, and unforgiving. Vehicles bogged down. Progress was agonizingly slow. and still no fire. For 30 long minutes, Marines scrambled up the beach, stunned by the eerie silence. Then, Kuribayashi gave the order. In a single unified moment, every concealed weapon, mortars, artillery, machine guns, erupted. The beaches were instantly transformed into a slaughterhouse. There was no cover. Marines dove for shell craters that didn't exist. Japanese gunners, using pre-registered coordinates, struck with horrifying precision. Machine guns raked the terraces at the beach's edge. By nightfall, 30,000 Marines had landed, establishing a beachhead that spanned the southern width of the island. They had succeeded in cutting Mount Suribachi off from the rest of the island. But the cost was staggering. Over 500 killed and more than 1,800 wounded in just one day. That night, Marines braced for the inevitable banzai charge, the hallmark of Japanese resistance across the Pacific. But no waves of screaming attackers came, only minor probing attacks, a psychological blow as much as a tactical one. Kuribayashi's discipline held. The Americans were confused, some were relieved, all were unsettled. The fight for Suribachi. On February 20th, the 28th Marine Regiment began the brutal task of taking Mount Suribachi. It was not a swift assault. It was a grinding crawl. Flamethrowers, seared bunkers, explosives, collapsed tunnels, grenades, cleared pillboxes. But each time a position was taken, the defenders vanished, only to reappear fighting from yet another tunnel exit. Colonel Kanehiko Atsuchi, commanding 1,800 men on the mountain, orchestrated the defense with resolve and cunning. After 3 days of unrelenting combat, on February 23rd, a Marine patrol reached the summit. At 10:20 a.m., they raised a small American flag, prompting cheers from across the beachhead. Later that day, a second, larger flag replaced the first. Joe Rosenthal, an Associated Press photographer, captured the moment. A single image that would become one of the most iconic photographs of World War II. But beneath the surface, the battle raged on. Deep inside Suribachi's tunnels, Japanese holdouts continued to fight for weeks, launching desperate counterattacks even after the summit was declared secure. The northern stronghold, the heart of Kuribayashi's defense, lay in the northern highlands, a brutal landscape of ravines, rocky ridges, and endless caves. Here, he had concentrated the majority of his forces. The terrain itself became a weapon. Every ridge was covered, every cave a bunker. Each position supported another, creating a web of fire that Marines would have to tear apart inch by bloody inch. American troops began giving names to these hellish places, names that reflected the terror and chaos they faced. The northern hellscape, they called them the Meat Grinder, Turkey Knob, Hill 382, the Amphitheater, Bloody Gorge, names given not by generals or cartographers, but by the men who bled and died trying to take them. Each was more than a hill or outcrop. Each was a fortress, a network of bunkers, trenches, caves, and tunnels woven into volcanic rock, and each had to be taken inch by blood-soaked inch. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions advanced together, converging on these strong points like waves crashing against cliffs. And Kuribayashi's defenses, ingenious, relentless, and inhumanly disciplined, held fast. Positions thought destroyed would come roaring back to life just hours later. Marines who believed they had cleared a bunker would find themselves under sudden fire. The defenders having slipped through unseen tunnels and reoccupied the dead ground. The Marines adapted. They had to. Tunnel warfare became their new reality. Flamethrowers were the weapon of choice, hell unleashed into darkness. Tunnel entrances were sealed with explosives. Whole passages were collapsed with satchel charges. Flamethrower teams paid the price, suffering casualty rates of up to 92%, yet they remained indispensable. By the end, 5th Marine Division flame tanks burned through 5,000 to 10,000 gallons of napalm per day. Desperation and determination. As February gave way to March, the situation inside the Japanese lines turned desperate. Food rations dwindled to starvation levels. Men fought with stomachs hollow and hands shaking. Water was so scarce. Dehydration ravaged entire units. There were no more medical supplies, no bandages, no painkillers, no relief. And yet, they fought on. Kuribayashi's strategy of maximum attrition was working. The battle that had been projected to last 5 days was entering its 3rd week. American casualties soared beyond all expectations. In the north, Baron Takechi Nishi continued to resist. His tanks long since destroyed or disabled, his unit fought as infantry, entrenched, embedded, determined. American intelligence tried to appeal to his past. They broadcast messages urging him to surrender, reminding him that the world would mourn his loss. But Nishi never responded. He remained with his men to the very end. On or around March 22nd to Nakano 45, Nishi was killed in action. The exact details remain a mystery. His body was never found. Some believe he died in battle. Others suggest he committed ritual suicide. Either way, he chose to die among his soldiers, not apart from them. He was posthumously promoted to colonel, awarded the Order of the Rising Sun, 3rd class, for his courage. The final hours, by mid-March, the Japanese defenders had been squeezed into a final half-square mile of broken black earth at the island's northern tip. And still, Kuribayashi commanded. Communications still passed through his tunnels. His men still obeyed his voice. On March 16th, he sent a message that read more like a eulogy than a report. I am very sorry because I can imagine the scenes of disaster in our empire. However, I comfort myself a little, seeing my officers and men die without regret after struggling in this inch-by-inch battle against an overwhelming enemy with many tanks and being exposed to indescribable bombardments. One day later, March 17th, he sent his last transmission to Tokyo. The battle is approaching its end. The strength under my command is now about 400. Tanks have invaded our last defense line at various sectors. They are now attacking our last stronghold. We continue to fight. I am sorry, indeed, we could not have defended the island successfully. We are still fighting. On March 25th, as the island lay in ruins, 300 of Kuribayashi's remaining men launched a final banzai charge, the very type of assault he had forbidden throughout the campaign. Perhaps it was desperation. Perhaps it was tradition reclaiming the last word. Kuribayashi's body was never found. Some believe he led the charge himself. Others say he died underground with his staff, refusing to be captured. Either way, his life ended on the island he had vowed to defend. Rear Admiral Ichimaru died during these final days as well. The cost: the United States declared Iwo Jima secured on March 26, 1945, exactly 36 days after the first Marine boots hit the black sand. But the fighting didn't stop. For weeks afterward, Japanese soldiers emerged from sealed tunnels, scavenging food and water, launching ambushes, resisting surrender. The Americans used explosives, seawater pumps, grenades, and flamethrowers to clear these final holdouts. 2 Japanese soldiers did not surrender until January 6, 1949, nearly 4 years later, living underground in silence, clinging to orders long obsolete. A battle measured in blood, the numbers told a story of their own, one that horrified both nations. American casualties, 26,038, total 6,821 dead, including 5,131 Marines killed in action from wounds or listed as missing. 209 Navy corpsmen and surgeons also lost, 19 died, 117 wounded. More Marines died on Iwo Jima than in all of World War I. It was the only battle in the Pacific where American casualties outnumbered Japanese, though Japan still suffered 3 times the combat deaths. Japanese casualties, approximately 21,000 defenders. Only 1,083 survived. Just 216 were captured during battle. The rest emerged from tunnels weeks or months later, sick, starved, and broken. Strategic victory, lingering controversy. Was it worth it? Militarily, yes. Iwo Jima became a critical emergency landing site for B-29 bombers, saving thousands of American aircrew lives. It allowed fighter escort for bombing raids deep into Japan. It paved the way for Okinawa and ultimately the endgame of the Pacific War. But even now, historians debate the cost. Was this volcanic island, caked in ash and blood, worth the thousands who died there? Kuribayashi had always known it would be a sacrifice, not a victory. Yet in death, he achieved what few could, forcing his enemies to admire his genius, mourn his resolve, and remember always the terrible price of war. Legacy, written in blood and ash. By the time the guns fell silent, Iwo Jima had earned its place not only in military history, but in human memory. What had once been a barren volcanic outpost was now a graveyard for thousands and a turning point in the final year of the war. And yet, from that destruction came salvation for many others. By war's end, 2,151 B-29 bombers had made emergency landings on the island's runways, often damaged, sometimes ablaze, carrying crews who otherwise would have perished in the vastness of the Pacific or crashed trying to reach the Marianas. An estimated 24,761 American airmen survived because Iwo Jima was in American hands. The first of them, a B-29 named Dynamite, landed on March 4, 1945, while the northern highlands were still echoing with gunfire and death. Soon, P-51 Mustang fighters based on Iwo Jima began escorting bombing missions deep into Japan to Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, ensuring greater survivability for American bombers. The island became a hub for air-sea rescue operations, cutting response times and saving the lives of downed flyers. The battle, though horrifying, produced moments of unforgettable valor. 27 Medals of Honor were awarded for actions on Iwo Jima, more than any other battle in Marine Corps history. 13 of those medals were awarded posthumously, and from the highest echelons of command came words that would echo for generations. Among the Americans who served on Iwo Island, said Fleet Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, uncommon valor was a common virtue. The tactical mastermind who changed the war. In cold, strategic terms, Kuribayashi's defense had worked, perhaps more effectively than even he imagined. He showed the world that even when faced with overwhelming firepower, industrial supremacy, and numerical superiority, a determined, well-prepared defender could extract a horrifying price from an attacker. American planners took note. They calculated that if the Japanese defended the home islands the way Kuribayashi had defended Iwo Jima, the result would be hundreds of thousands, even millions, of American casualties in an invasion. These projections would directly influence the decision to drop atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, rather than execute Operation Downfall, the planned invasion of Japan. For Japan, only grief. For Japanese families, there were no flag raisings, no triumphant headlines, only silence and loss. Most of the fallen were never found. Their bodies remained in tunnels collapsed by explosions or entombed in caves now sealed by time. Notices arrived in mailboxes, sons declared dead in battle, but no graves, no funerals, no ashes to mourn. In Japanese Buddhist tradition, a proper burial is more than ritual. It is spiritual release, closure. Iwo Jima denied that to thousands. Even decades after the war, Japanese search teams returned to the island, crawling through its caves and tunnels. More than 10,000 remains are still believed to lie beneath the island's black soil. A battle overshadowed and later remembered. In the immediate aftermath of war, Iwo Jima faded from Japanese public consciousness. Why? Because the nation was consumed by far greater horrors. The firebombing of Tokyo, Osaka, and other cities had killed over 900,000 civilians. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had claimed another 200,000 lives. Cities were ash, families shattered, the nation brought to its knees. Amid such devastation, Iwo Jima became just one more loss in a year of apocalyptic suffering. Only in later decades did the Japanese begin to re-examine the battle, not just as a military engagement, but as a human tragedy. In 1970, Yoshi Kuribayashi, widow of the general, attended a luncheon in Tokyo with American veterans. She thanked them for their words of peace and received a standing ovation. She later returned to Iwo Jima for the 1985 and 1995 reunions of honor, walking the battlefield where her husband had died, not in hatred, but in remembrance. In 1985, former enemies, now old men, walked side by side, pointing out cave entrances, gun emplacements, and foxholes. They wept together, they prayed together, they remembered the dead, both friend and foe. These reunions, held every 5 years, have become a ritual of reconciliation, a bridge across the decades. A sacred island today, Iwo Jima is officially known by its traditional Japanese name, Iwoto. Its landscape remains much as it was in 1945, scarred, solemn, sacred. Civilian access is heavily restricted. Only veterans, families of the fallen, and officials may attend memorial services. A small Japanese naval air facility operates quietly. The U.S. Navy still occasionally uses the runways for carrier landing practice. But most days, the island is still a graveyard, a monument, a silent witness. Japanese and American memorials now stand side by side in solemn acknowledgement of the terrible price both nations paid. Lessons carved into doctrine. Modern historians, with access to records from both sides, have reached remarkably consistent conclusions. Tactically, defense in depth, when implemented by a skilled commander like Kuribayashi, can transform terrain into a weapon. Strategically, Iwo Jima's value as a fighter base and emergency airfield justified its capture, though debate continues as to whether the cost was proportionate. But beyond tactics and strategy, the battle revealed something deeper: the industrial might, logistical brilliance, and adaptability of the United States. The engineering skill, tactical creativity, and fierce spirit of Japanese defenders. Memory and meaning. In the United States, Iwo Jima holds iconic status. Joe Rosenthal's photograph became a national symbol. The Marine Corps War Memorial in Arlington, Virginia, immortalized the moment. Every Marine recruit still learns the story of Iwo Jima. In Japan, the battle remained obscure until 2006, when Clint Eastwood's film Letters from Iwo Jima reframed it. Shot in Japanese, with Japanese actors, it told the story from Kuribayashi's perspective, based on his letters in the book So Sad to Fall in Battle by Kumiko Kakahashi. That film, and the renewed interest it sparked, finally brought the forgotten defenders into the national consciousness. And so the island endures. Black sand, silent caves, wind over stone, no longer a battlefield, but a place of memory, where thousands remain entombed, where valor was common, where victory and loss were written in equal measure, and where decades later enemies became brothers in mourning. Iwo Jima, or Iwoto, remains not only a strategic landmark, but a human one, a place where history was made and remembered. Echoes from the ashes, lessons, legacy, and loss. From the depths of Iwo Jima's charred and shaken earth came lessons that would echo far beyond 1945. The world was watching, and militaries everywhere took note. Combined arms tactics, once a theory, became standard operating procedure. The integration of infantry, armor, artillery, naval bombardment, and air support proved essential when facing an entrenched, disciplined foe. The need for specialized weapons, flame tanks, bunker-busting explosives, and demolition teams was no longer optional, but a requirement in modern war. And perhaps most hauntingly, tunnel warfare, once seen as primitive, was now recognized as a terrifyingly effective strategy. Its legacy would live on in the jungles of Vietnam, where the Viet Cong would resurrect Kuribayashi's tactics, fighting from underground like ghosts of Iwo Jima. The battle laid bare an inescapable truth. Even with all the industrial might in the world, bombers, battleships, endless supply chains, you cannot eliminate the need for infantry to close with and destroy the enemy face to face, a general's soul in ink. Amid the roar of shell fire and the suffocating silence of tunnels, General Kuribayashi wrote letters, intimate, aching, philosophical. To his beloved wife Yoshi and to their children, he poured out a father's love and a soldier's resignation. He knew he would not survive. He did not flinch. In one letter, he wrote the words that encapsulated his resolve and that of every man who stood beside him. If our children can live safely for one more day, it would be worth the one more day that we defend this island. Did the defense of Iwo Jima truly protect Japan? Did it delay the inevitable? Perhaps not. But what mattered was not the outcome, it was the belief. And from that belief sprang a determination that refused to die. A monument of courage and ash, the Battle of Iwo Jima endures as one of the most harrowing and unforgiving clashes in the annals of war. A 36-day struggle where approximately 27,000 men died or were maimed, fighting over 8 square miles of volcanic desolation. It was a battle that exposed the brutal cost of war. It showcased the boundless courage of ordinary men, trapped in extraordinary circumstances. And in time, it became a testament to the possibility of reconciliation, even between bitter enemies. Those who never left General Kuribayashi, Baron Nishi, Rear Admiral Ichimaru, and the 21,000 Japanese soldiers who answered the call. They fought for a cause already lost, bound by duty and culture to defend a homeland they would never see again. They died not because they believed they would win, but because they believed they must fight. And they did, with courage that even their enemies could not deny. Their fate was sealed not by their failure, but by the tides of history. 4 months after the battle ended, Japan surrendered unconditionally. The homeland they died to defend was saved not by bullets, but by the bombs that fell on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The island remains today Iwo Jima, or Iwoto, as it is officially known, remains unchanged in geography, but transformed in meaning. The tunnels, once sheltered desperate defenders, now entomb only dust and memory. The beaches, where Marines clawed through black ash under relentless fire, now sit in silence, visited only by veterans, researchers, and mourners. The monuments, American and Japanese, stand side by side, not as symbols of triumph or defeat, but of shared sacrifice. Kuribayashi's final legacy, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, died as he had lived, with honor, courage, and absolute devotion to his men. His body was never found, but his legacy endures in the letters he wrote, filled with duty and love, in the respect accorded to him by the very Marines he fought against, in the example he set, a commander who led from the front, shared every hardship, and never once considered himself above his soldiers. Baron Takeichi Nishi, the Olympic champion once toasted by Hollywood stars, died not with medals in hand, but as a soldier, fighting Americans he had once called friends. His death is a tragedy, not just of war, but of how war twists the lives of men meant for other paths. And the 21,000 defenders of Iwo Jima, they lie still, most of them in the same tunnels where they fell, remembered now not just as enemies, but as men who fought bravely, who endured the unimaginable, and who never gave up until the last breath. The final truth: Iwo Jima is not just history, it is a lesson, a warning, a place of reverence, a place where the line between valor and futility, between enemy and brother, blurs in the face of shared suffering, a place where the silence of the dead speaks louder than the noise of battle ever could, and above all, a place that reminds us peace is not a given, it is earned, often at a terrible price.